You're listening to Countercurrent, the podcast about business, family, and freedom. Hosted by Aaron Smith and Jack Hudson.
So, Aaron, you've told me before that you had to work in 3 different spaces in high school. Your parents made you. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, and I hated it at the time. But my dad, as a farmer, said you can go off and do whatever you want to with your life. But before you do, you have to have 3 different types of jobs. You have to have a job in food service, a job in retail, and a job in physical labor. So I was like, okay. So living on the south side of Indianapolis, we were near Jonathan Bird's. So I worked in an old person cafeteria and scooped chicken livers and mashed potatoes and cafeteria food for people that got off a bus. Which I've never eaten a chicken liver again after that. So I also worked at Staples. Then I worked at Staples at the height of the Easy Button era. And so you had kids coming in and slapping the button all day long, and definitely taught you patience. And then I thought I would call my dad's bluff, and I didn't think that I would have to have the job in physical labor. And so my dad's an insurance agent, and so he gave me the shot. He said, okay, you're either gonna have to go find the job, or I'm gonna find it for you. And so I called his bluff. I didn't think that he would. And one of his clients is a sunflower farm, which, thinking about a sunflower farm, you think there's, leprechauns dancing around all day. It is horrible. My biggest pet peeve in the world is having wet socks, and you go out there at 6 a.m, and I was working with an elderly guy and then another guy that was deaf. And so I'm out there alone, walking through a field, no one to talk to, no one's listening to me. Your socks are wet, and you have a machete harvesting sunflowers, and it's horrible work. But it taught me a lot. It taught me grit, and I always feel like I had some drive going into the business world. But that definitely pushed me along, right? And definitely when I got to college, I was able to launch off from there. And I think that's part of the roots that were planted early on to start my own business and call my own shots.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about you?
Well, I've told you mine is very different. I had no traditional job until college, really. First job was babysitting 4 girl cousins between the ages of 2 and 9, all summer, full time, made good money. Put on a cooking show every day for lunch to keep them entertained. Paid the girls to change the youngest diaper because I refused to do it.
It's an investment in your own well-being.
It cost me a couple hours of wages every day just to get them to change the diapers. And then I gave guitar lessons when I started playing guitar, and did that through a studio in Pendleton, Indiana, where I grew up. And then in high school, my parents were like, you need to make gas money. So I built my uncle a website on Squarespace and bought a camera with the money, and started doing videos and photos and senior photos and photographing houses for my mom. And then quickly met my first business partner, who we started right at the start of COVID, doing professional video work, did a first political campaign, did corporate work in Atlanta, super cool. And I was 15 meeting with people I shouldn't have met with. It's kind of the theme of my existence. And then we went to college, split up, and Emily and I started Babbel. So it's been, in addition to internships and regular jobs through college, but it's been sort of a serial entrepreneur journey in its own way. But yeah, I think a lot of that comes from the fact that all of my family is self-employed. My mom was a realtor. My stepdad had his own business, still does. And then my grandpa was in construction, had his own business. My uncle, my cousins have their own construction company. So my whole family was self-employed, and a lot of them worked with their spouses, and none of that scared me out of the gate. And it's really convenient to have a bunch of help saying, here's how you start an LLC, or I'll just do that for you, don't worry about it, which could be a huge hesitation for people thinking about it.
What would you say was the first bite of the entrepreneurial bug?
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's a good question. I think, like starting with the camera, it was filming high school sports games and stuff. And then it was somebody reached out and said, hey, how much would it cost to, get the shot of my son or something? And I was like, okay, so people just want to pay for something cool of themselves, right? And that even started with the website. Like I was building this website for my uncle and I was like, wow, this looks a lot better than what most people do just because it's not old and out of date. And seeing that you could make the money. And if I wanted to work from 6 to 8 p.m. or I wanted to work from noon to 2, I could. And I think that flexibility was the biggest thing. And that's true in college too, because what I found myself doing for the first 2 years of school, I guess, since I graduated in 3, was during the day I'd go to class and then in the evening I'd work. And during the day I'd catch up on emails. And then senior year, it was like any break between class, I was just working. So it was business hours. So I could get back to people on time. And then in the evening, I'd get caught up on all my schoolwork. So being able to do that from the get-go was like, why would you do anything else? It's addictive when you have the freedom.
Oh, it's so true. And that's what, coming in today, I was thinking about that. The answer to that own question for me, what was the entrepreneurial bug? When did that bite for me? And looking back, mine actually hit a long time before I actually started my own business. When I started as a intern on the Hill, it's a very self-driven place. You have to have relationships, but you also have to have drive in order to succeed and move up the ladder. And so I started as the guy that answers the phones, which is the worst job on the face of the planet. Even though I loved the guy who I worked for, no one calls their senator when they're happy. It's only when they're pissed. And so for me, I learned a lot about how to deal with people, the customer service aspect of it, and how to learn a lot about a ton of different topics. After that, I went back and worked on his legislative team for a while. So you got to really dive deep in some certain areas. And then I had this moment where I was like, I don't want to live in DC forever. Like I want to end up back in Indiana. But I don't know how to do that. I don't want to be a lobbyist. I don't want to go down the normal route that a lot of people on the Hill go. And so I was trying to, honestly, the entrepreneurial bug hit when I was trying to figure out how to pivot from there. And so I went to my chief of staff and I said, hey, I think that we really need to dive into digital comms. And I felt like I was really prepared. And he politely said, no, we don't need to do that. And so really it was a great moment for me to take a step back and say like, okay, I did not prep myself the way that I should for this meeting. So I went back, prepared this massive memo stating the case for why we needed to do it. And so I went back and I gave it to him and he said, all right, we'll give it a shot. You have to still do your job that you're paid to do, but we'll let you moonlight doing this and we'll see if it takes off. And obviously in the industry that you and I both work in, it took off like wildfire. At that point, it was 2012, 2013. So we were still committing egregious social media sins at the time, but we started doing more video. We started doing more on social media and engaging with people, and it was awesome. It was great. I'm all self-taught, and so it was a great opportunity to dive deeper into that as well. And really, that paved the way for me to start my business afterward. Because then, when my wife and I moved back to Indiana, I had already. Even though it was under the guise of working for the federal government, I was able to learn how to drive on my own path in a route that was not already there.
Yeah. I think being self-taught is such a huge part of entrepreneurship.
Oh yeah.
It's like you can't stop learning, or it's like feast or famine. Your business will die if you quit innovating with the times. Yep. And that was a gripe with college for me, because they were like, oh, you can't have an internship for your first 2 years for credit, right? This is one of their rules, because they want you to take knowledge in. And then they're like, and then you should have a mentor there who teaches you or expands upon your skills. And I was like, do you realize some of my old bosses from different jobs still call me and ask me how to do things, because what I was doing was not what they were doing. Yep. I mean, I was basically part-time staff for months or full-time staff on like a trial basis is how it was. And that's what else sort of bit me about entrepreneurship and knowing that this would work was, hey, okay, this is desired and not that many people know how to do it out there. Where is it needed the most? And that's clearly a value add. So for those of you that don't know, Emily and I do video production and digital strategy, mainly for political campaigns. But when we were leaving the Hill, because we were out there for a summer, it was like, okay, out here, there's the people we'd want to work for are super hardworking and maybe not the most dedicated to being on the front page of the Wall Street Journal or to getting every press clip they can or getting a bunch of Fox News hits, right? And we don't necessarily want to work for people that are more focused about their message than their work for constituents. So we said, okay, where is what we do needed? And we said on campaigns, right? It's not an option not to have a social media presence anymore. And people need to go viral with smart ideas. And we need to help those people that maybe struggle to message because they're talking about really nitty gritty subjects to get their message out there. And part of that is, yes, we have to hype up the messages that work already. But then once you get that following, you can come in there and provide really valuable information. And that's where sort of being out there, we realized that we wanted to live in Indiana, and it was, okay, how can we make this work? And where is this really needed for the people we like working for?
So dig in on that. Why Indiana though? Because I mean, there's tons of firms out in DC, and people think that if you work in politics, you have to be in DC. How'd you figure out the way to go it your own way?
Emily and I both turned down jobs, which was terrifying because we were heading into our senior year of school, and we could have had good paying, what I thought was my dream job all growing up in DC right away. Her working for a consulting firm, me working for one of 2 or 3 places on the Hill, all of which would have given me a lot of freedom to run with creative ideas. But while we were out there, we realized that we missed our family. Our family's here, our community's here, our network's here, and this business we had worked on was here. And I think now we could probably move to DC and make our business work and stay plenty busy. But it was also, we didn't want to give up on this community we had dug in and built. And we love it here. I mean, I say to everybody at Butler when I go back, everybody I meet, like, I'm the biggest Indiana fan. I will advocate for Indiana through and through because there's nothing not to like other than the fact that it's a seasonal state, right? We have world-class sports. We have great concert venues. We have great small towns. We have great cities. And that's only going to grow. And we see that growing, every day. It seems like there's a big announcement, whether it's here in Noblesville or downtown or in Boone County. People are making strides to make this a hub for manufacturing and culture and arts and everything. And I will always advocate for that. But I think a lot of it was that network of, hey, I know all these people here, people that if I do fail, or, as my mom would say, if Emily gets pregnant one day, I can call them up and get a job with benefits if I need to, right? And those people are all over the state and that's what I always say the biggest selling point of Butler is anyone from their network will pick up the phone. And I pushed that to the absolute limit in college, getting coffees and lunches and drinks with people that I shouldn't have met with, right? Again, because CEOs will answer and COOs will answer and the head of a bank will answer who was an alumni. And they'll help you every step of the way from here's what business lending looks like to Jack, here's a vertical you should expand into to Jack, have you thought seriously about your business development? What do you want to do in 5 years? And being located in Indy for 3 years to get my business started meant a lot of those meetings right away. And they're the people I love to work with. And I've also found people warned me when I got started that some people in politics are not great to work with or that you want to be wary of. And I found that my people in Indiana, I knew that they were good people, they were smart people, and they were principled people. And whether we agree or not on everything in the political world or the personal world, they've all got my back. And I've got theirs. And I just want to be, a success for them to tout as a mentee one day, right? And I think that Hoosier hospitality played into it a lot.
It's funny. That's a lesson that I learned in somewhat of a different way, though, on the Hill. I mean, there's thousands of people that work in the House and the Senate. But what's most amazing to me is that a good majority of those people didn't get there on their own. Right. There are a lot of people, and it was explained to me when I was an intern, if you want to work on the Hill, you have to do the work while you're there in the capacity that you have. But you also have to know the right people, and you have to do it authentically. And so that's what starting as an intern on the Hill, I sat down and I had coffee after coffee with people from the Indiana delegation and other tangential areas of interest that I had. Yeah. And what I found so interesting and encouraging was from a staff assistant all the way up to the chief of staff would most likely take the meeting because somebody took the meeting for them early on. And so when I was looking for a job there, I probably had 40 coffees, and those relationships are ones that I still lean on today. So the guy that was a dweeby intern, the best example I have, one of the people that sat down and talked to me was Mel Raines, and I guarantee she doesn't remember it because again, I was this intern in Dan Coates' office. But what was so amazing is she did take time to sit down with me, even though they didn't have a job opportunity in their office. And she still walked me through how she got to where she did, and even the opportunity to talk to somebody who ran a Super Bowl, has worked in the House and the Senate. She worked for Dan Coates as well. She worked for the executive branch under President Bush, and now is the CEO of the Pacers. Those are relationships that we still lean on today. The last year we announced that the Pacers were expanding to Noblesville in their G League. And when Chris Jensen and I sat down with the Pacers team, it was Mel Raines and Danny Lopez on the other side of the table. And all four of us had worked for Dan Coates at one point in time. And so that was what I thought was so interesting in an entity as big as the Hill, where there are thousands of people. It is still such a small world, and you never know how those relationships will come back to help you later on in life. That was 10 years after I had that meeting. I had no idea that I would ever talk to Mel Raines again. But it goes to show that whether it's business, whether it's politics, there are so many lines that cross. Yeah. And if you authentically try to build those relationships, it will come back, kind of like planting a seed early on.
And that's what I found. I mean, it's weird because it's almost been 2 years since I was out there now, which seems weird. It freaks Matt Lauer out every time I see him. He's like, that can't be right.
17 political lifetimes ago.
Yeah. And I met with people from Tim Scott's office while Emily was working on his campaign. Mm-hmm. And they're like, hey, if you need a job, reach out after you graduate. All these people, they'd meet with you, and as long as you were honest with them and took the time to really get to know them and think of them and follow up, always happy to help and always happy to keep your name on file and look out for something for you. And that's true to this day. And I think that's something that maybe in Indiana is not taught well enough, is that ability to network and reach out and have good relationships, especially for young people getting started. I think that's like the biggest thing they're missing. Yep. Because it can be scary to send the cold email or cold text or whatever. But normally you could probably start with your parents and say, hey, is there anybody I should meet with, or a teacher or a professor? And they normally have somebody. But that was sort of one of the lessons I took back from DC was I want to be sort of the DC level of political successful in terms of what we do in Indiana, because why not? Yep. Because you can be now. And part of that means starting on DC Scraps. Somebody we both know told me that. And that's where I was like, we both took that mentality back here where like, there's no reason we can't be doing what the big players are doing in Indiana. Everything is a flight, a drive, or a phone call away. Yep. And we have great connections out there now that are advocating for us. People that worked in the speaker's office, people that work in the whip's office right now. Those are people we still get to meet up with when we go out there, and that will always vouch for us or see if they can plug us in some way. And that I think is a huge detriment to sort of the mentality of starting in Indiana, of this Well, and the mentality of not being in the non-entrepreneurial mindset teaches you to go to school, get a job, you'll be fine, right? But along the way, you're missing out on these relationships that can really excel you. And I see that with friends that are, how do you become that 28-year-old that leveraged themselves to leadership before they're 30, right? And I think a lot of what those people do differently is they figure out how they can get a coffee with the person ahead of them. And then that person will intro them to the person ahead of them. And then they figure out how to make those people's lives easier. I think that's all it takes. If you can make somebody's life easier, even if it's just for a day, they will vouch for you. And you just had something like that come up where you helped somebody out and then they helped you out. I think that mentality hasn't saturated Indiana yet.
Correct. And I think doing that authentically, right? That's the key. Because I would say that's the other side of DC, the other side of that coin. There are lots of people that try to do it inauthentically. And you can tell. And so that's what I've always tried to do. That you mentioned it a little bit, but when I sat down to have coffee with people, the vast majority of them had no job available. And so my ask always was, I want you to introduce me to 3 people that you think would be interesting for me to talk to. And what was great is it just naturally expands to the network because you have somebody else vouching for you saying, hey, this is a good guy that you should meet with. And so then when you do sit down and have coffee, you already have somewhat of an in, and it's a really low pressure meeting that you get to have. But I think it's a great way to naturally expand your network in an era that like social media is super inauthentic. And so being able to do that in person and establish real relationships just pays dividends down the road.
Absolutely. Yeah. Coffees are a great invention, right? I don't know if it's the drink or the place or what. But
it is funny. Before, when I was on the Hill, I actually didn't drink coffee. And then when I started having all these meetings when I moved back to Indiana, I felt like I needed to learn how to drink coffee. And so I was like, well, if I'm going to learn how to drink coffee, I'm going to learn how to drink it black because I'm not going to get any frou-frou stuff in there. So this is double shot of espresso. That's my thing every single day.
That's right. Well, and then you had kids and started waking up at 5 a.m., right?
That does make a difference too. I have to have a little shot of caffeine before I start the day. Something else that I thought was interesting, thinking about starting a business, mentors have been a huge piece of that for me. At one point I looked at, after I started my business, I was looking at going back to get an MBA, which is something that I may do down the road still. But really, when you're going through an MBA program, you do it to establish the relationships. And I said, well, until I get to that point, I want to, get some mentors in my life. What does that look like for you?
For me? Getting mentors? Well, that's the weird thing. And I actually asked this we had this college class and they were talking about mentorship and how important it is. And I said, well, how's that work? I said, are you supposed to go up to somebody and say, hey, will you be my mentor? Because that feels a little odd, right? Going up to a 60-year-old man that's had success in business and being like, hey, will you look out for me for a couple of years and help me be successful? And they're like, I don't think that's how it works. And I was like, yeah, but you don't have a good answer. And I think it's a clicking thing, right? It's have those network relationships, put you in touch with more people and see who you click with and whose ideas you admire and who will call you out if you need called out. And you also have to know where to put your boundaries at. I have a great mentor that I meet with fairly regularly, and he'll bring up these ideas for me for business development. And on one of them, I just said, if I'm being honest, I'm just not passionate about that. I'm not going to enjoy doing that. And he's brought it up several times. And every time I'm like, hey, I don't really want to do that. And he said, I appreciate that you stick up for what you're passionate about and that's what you pursue. And I think that's part of the mentor-mentee relationship is you're both teaching each other. I have people younger than me that I meet with. I have people older than me that I meet with. And you advocate for each other. You help each other out. But you also know that your business is your business and my business is my business. And there's infinite roads to get to success.
Yep. That's good.
But I think that, yeah, some of it starts naturally of, hey, what school did you go to?
Yep.
Did you join Greek life or a club or, what internship did you have? Or are you from Dan Coates World or Todd Young World or wherever else the hill has that natural effect. But I think those natural things then lead you in. So like first I started by meeting Butler alums. That helped get me my first internship. And then I met fraternity alums that connected me with more people and helped with financial advice and all that sort of thing. And then those people say, hey, I know somebody else in Indy that you should meet with. And then when you meet all these people and you go to DC, you say, hey, we're going to take a 3-day trip to DC. Can you help me land some meetings out there? And then you wind up having 15 in 3 days.
Yep.
And that's, I think it is a compounding effect, like what you said. But none of it happens if you don't do good work and you don't have momentum.
Yep.
And that's what I've found. If I don't go back to mentors if I do good work, right, the person at the top is way more likely to meet with me. Especially if it's a mutual connection or, hey, we've been supportive of that campaign. We saw your video work. Let's meet up. And if you don't have momentum or something to update them with, right? Yeah, you need both of those things. Here's what's been going on. Here's the work we've been doing. Just wanted to share. And it's those touch points that matter so much to keeping those relationships alive. Because normally if you're asking somebody to be your mentor, they've got it a little more figured out than you, right? So you want to be respectful of their time too.
Yep.
And I always try to be respectful of their time while getting my questions in and everything. But yeah, and normally I try to ask, what can I do for you, right? So normally I wind up with some level of homework after those meetings of, hey, I'm going to connect you with this business to maybe do video work for, and I want you to help write out your ideas for an alumni program for X university. Since you just got out of school, I think it'll be beneficial coming from you. Great. Happy to do it. So I think keeping that being a mutual relationship, and of course you have to care about each other too.
Yep.
It can't just be transactional.
The authenticity.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I've said to many people, mentors, if you have a good mentor, they're bought into you and not your idea. So if Babel Media went under tomorrow and I need to pick myself up with a new idea, I know I could go back to these 3 mentors and they would be there because they think Jack's going to be a success one day, or they think Aaron's going to be a success one day. And it might not be now. I'm 21 still. It could be in 10 years. But
age doesn't matter.
That's right. Yeah, that's a whole nother episode.
Yeah.
But they get bought in on that and not the idea. And I think that's so important, is to find those people that aren't just with you because they think what you're doing is going to make money or something. It's, no, I think you're a good person with good ideas and you have a good work ethic.
Yep.
And that's so much more important than X good idea.
Yep. I completely agree. It was actually my pastor, Darren Chesky, who explained mentorship the best to me. This was, almost a decade ago. But he said, the whole idea between mentors and mentees should be like a river, right? If you're sitting in the middle and you picture yourself as a lake and you are only pouring into people, you're going to become dry. So if you just have a few mentees below you, you're not being filled in. If you look at it the opposite way, if you only have mentors and no one else under you, you become kind of the stagnant pool of water because you don't have any outlets. And so if you have people pouring into you and you're pouring into other people, it's really this like healthy relationship on both sides. And what I have found most interesting in my almost 15 years in the professional world, I learn almost as much with the people that I mentor than they get from me. It's funny, I say that I'm a 90-year-old trapped in a 35-year-old body. And so for people that are younger than me, or that are earlier on in their career that I, take on as a mentor, I learn a ton from them about what younger people think. But then also, when I sit down to look at the way that I should scale my business, that was one of the things when I was hiring people, when I've had to fire people, right? I've talked to people that are ahead of me in their careers. I have somebody that's 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years ahead of me. And none of them are in the communications world, which is even more helpful because they're not necessarily tied to the industry that I'm in. But they've all had to walk through the things that I have as business owners. And so it's been really helpful for me because there isn't, you can Google anything, sure, but there's no practical playbook for how to scale. And to your point earlier, no one knows your business the way that you do. And so while they give great advice, I think the hardest part as an entrepreneur is figuring out like, okay, how do you pick what they give you and then translate it into the issue that you're facing?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that what you're saying almost reminds me of church, where when you go, especially after a long time, it feels like whatever that message is perfectly applies to your life.
Yep.
Right. And I think that's the thing with mentorship as well. Mm-hmm. Whenever you have that meeting, personally, I think there's nothing more rewarding than like a great 1 hour conversation with somebody where it's going both ways. And sometimes this is another thing. You get a coffee with somebody and it's a total dud. Right. It feels sticky the whole time.
Yep.
It's like you're pulling teeth, they're pulling teeth.
Yep.
Nothing clicks. But it's worth having 3 duds to get one great one.
Yep.
And when you get a great one, there's nothing more rewarding than starting a new relationship with somebody. And normally you come away with a snippet that perfectly applies to something you're going through right now.
Yep.
Or some business development problem you're facing. And sometimes I'm probably overly honest and transparent with our ideas and everything. I just put them all out there. I'm like, here's what we're doing. I normally say, please don't steal this idea.
Yes.
But we think it's a good one, and I hope it doesn't take business from you, and I hope you don't steal it, pretty much.
Yep.
And I'm happy to tell people because normally they have great ideas to feed into it.
Yep.
If I just had an hour of genuine conversation with them, they're probably not going to turn around and stab me in the back.
Yep.
And the more people that know about it, it's better for you, right? It's better that your name and your brand get out there. So I kind of practice that overly transparent, honest. If you're sitting down with me in person, I'm happy to tell you whatever you want to know.
Yep.
If it's over the phone, maybe I'll be more careful. But if we're looking at each other in the eyes, right? And then I think that's when you take the most away from it.
Yep.
Is when you can get that person to be like equally as transparent of, well, here's the time we struggled, or you know, I don't have any work lined up next month.
Yep.
If they can say that, right, then why shouldn't I share my good and my bad ideas?
Yep.
Because nobody has it all together all the time.
And I think the other thing, you know, very practical example for me, when Dan Coates announced he was retiring, he did not know that he would eventually get tapped to be director of national intelligence. And so I was looking for jobs, you know, the last 6 months of, you know, him being in office, and I was trying to figure out what was next for me. Again, I had this, you know, somewhat of an entrepreneurial bug. And so it was actually Dan Coates, who I consider a mentor in my life, who said, you should open your own business. You've done this for me. You know how to do it. And so for me, something that was so obvious to him was not obvious to me. And so sometimes I think it really helps for you to have other people in your life that know you well, that they can kind of bring that to light. And so for me, that's how I started my business. As he was transitioning to director of national intelligence, he was actually my first client. So I took him on in that transition process. And then that gave me enough oomph to get across the line to then start going out and finding clients of my own. And so really finding people that believe in you and that do so authentically is, I think, such a huge part in entrepreneurship, because while people from the outside looking in think that, you know, entrepreneurship is this solo journey, really it's not. You have to have people in your corner in order to succeed. You cannot do it on your own.
I think it's the most collaborative journey you can take.
Yep.
And I think, you know, there's 2 ways to look at entrepreneurship, and neither of them are wrong, right? You can build a business that you want to scale and grow beyond yourself, right? And hire as many people as you can. Or you can say, I want to build something that supports me and my lifestyle.
Yep.
And then when I'm done, it's done, sort of thing.
Yep.
Maybe I can sell my client book. And both have their own challenges, and both have their own strengths, right? And I think finding that, initially you have to support yourself right away.
Yep.
Right. And luckily I can be on my parents' insurance for a few more years and that sort of thing. But I have that many years to figure out, okay, then how do I get my own health insurance plan? And then that's a whole nother thing. But we have a mutual connection, Rocky, who told me, he said that the stress of entrepreneurship never stops. It just turns into a different thing.
Yep.
It goes from, hey, how do I make enough money to pay the bills? To, hey, is it time to get that office? Is it time to hire someone? Oh no, we hired a lot of people and I'm playing HR now.
Yep.
Hey, do I want to cut back? And that's your whole life, right? We talk about it all the time. We can set our schedule, and if on a Wednesday we're not that busy and Emily and I want to go run around and run errands, great.
Yep.
But also I'm thinking about the fact that we're not that busy, or I'm thinking about the fact that I'm waiting on that email and I might get it at 8 p.m. and have to answer. There's no set timeline for your clients.
Yep.
And you are the call, and you want to provide a great experience every time. And so on the one hand, you have more flexibility than anyone else does.
Yep.
On the other hand, your brain is always in that state to some extent. And I don't know about you, but I don't think work-life balance is a thing.
Yeah.
I think
it's hard.
It's like work-life integration.
Yep.
Is you're never going to be 100% work or 100% personal.
Yep.
And for me, right, like I feel like I haven't always known what my parents did growing up, or I want my kids to know what I do and how value is made. And I want them to know what their value is. And I try to preach that to people in Butler or wherever that I talk to, of like, hey, you could go charge this much to do that.
Yep.
Do you realize this? So I want people to know their value, and I want my whole family to. And I want it to be an integrated thing of, hey, here's how we collectively make money, and here's how things work, and here's what we do and how we think. And the goal isn't to make somebody else go do what we do. It's to teach problem solving and knowing your value. So if you do want to go down the traditional path, great, but know how much you should make.
Yep.
And a lot of that is not because you can apply for 100 jobs, but who did you get coffee with?
Yep.
Learning that skill of, oh, this person can help me get a job that pays 30% more than the jobs on LinkedIn that I'm finding. Or it's such a great experience that it will get me there 3 years faster.
I love that concept. Jason Manship, who owns Moonshot, just downstairs. That's the reason why he opened the game shop. Was he and his wife had kids, and he was working in IT, and he would come home and his kids had no idea what he did and how he did it. And so he's like, man, I want my family to be a part of what I do. I want to have an impact in my community. I have the ability, like I know how to run businesses. I've bought and sold and, done all of these different types of businesses. Why don't I do this? And that was right before COVID. And when he started that business, which is on the square downtown Noblesville, it launched through the roof. Moonshot, pun intended. Not only was he serving his family and bringing his family into what he does, but he, came in and created such an asset for the community as well. And so I think there's so many other layers of entrepreneurship too, that it's not just, it is what you're doing for you, but it's what you're also doing for your family, for your community, and how you bring others into that to affect change.
Right. Well, and I think those are my favorite people to meet, are the ones that have some servant component to it. And I think I've been bit by that bug since I was young, whether it's student government or getting involved in clubs or volunteering at a camp to play guitar or this or that or the other. I want to give back to my community.
You're a triple threat. You play guitar too, man.
Hardly anymore. Yeah, it's funny. I saw the high school band director and he was giving me a hard time for not playing. But that's, I think that's such a huge part of it. And the people I've met that I like the most are the ones that got bit by that servant's bug, whether you're on city council or you're volunteering at a high school program or you're volunteering at your church or you worked in government because you wanted to do good, not because you wanted to meet somebody cool. All those sorts of things are, I think, make the best mentors and relationships. And a lot of times just really successful people giving back to you
Yep.
shows the fact that they have a servant's heart and they want to pour into the next generation.
Yep.
And that can be their contribution too. But just like that story, it's pouring into your community typically gives back to yourself in some way.
Yep.
Down the road.
And it's, so fascinating. As I started my business, I had this moment after I had formalized everything, I got my LLC. And I realized I had no idea what I was doing.
No one does.
Yeah. No, and that's what I found out along the way, right? No one knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
And, but really I had the people around me to help speak into me, right? As I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it. I realized that, I look out our office on the square and you see people that own businesses, own buildings. All of them started at some point and had no idea what they were doing. Mm-hmm. And if they say they knew what they were doing, they're lying, right? Yeah. It's just, there are so many things you just learn along the way. Yeah. And I think the biggest thing with entrepreneurship is you have to be willing to take the risk and be willing to fail.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, that's probably the hardest part, is being willing to fail.
Yeah. Well, and that's, some people say don't chase your passion or whatever,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
My thing is chase your monetizable passion,
yep,
right?
Yep.
So if you're really good at something that you can make money on, absolutely pursue it through the wall. And yep. If there's something that maybe would be really challenging to make money on, but yep. you're good at, maybe keep that as your hobby,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Or find ways to do that. And if it takes off, great.
Yep.
Like I have a buddy from Butler who is going to flight school, but he plays the drums and he studied music in college. And he says, I want to be a pilot. And when I get off places, I want to go play gigs. And
that's super cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Right. He found two things he's passionate
yes.
about.
Yeah.
One will pay the bills always, and he gets
yeah.
to see the world.
Yeah.
And the other, he can do anywhere.
Yeah.
He can fly into New Orleans and play in a jazz club.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's such a great example of that.
Yep.
Right. And gosh, where was I going with this? But
I think figuring out what those interests are and then how to align them is definitely a huge key part. You mentioned Rocky earlier. He and his now brother-in-law started a business together, and that at one point it was in Greencastle, then it was in Fishers, now it's in Noblesville, and they moved to a building in Noblesville, and then figured our wives love to bake. What if they opened a bakery below? And they didn't set out to just become a bakery, right? It was something that they figured out along the way. And one of the things I remember the first time I sat down with Rocky, he said, there's tons of bakeries out there. There's tons of coffee shops out there. I want to be like the butcher of baked goods, where somebody comes and they get their loaf of bread there every week. And maybe they stop and get a coffee too, but really like they come for that. And we're going to have like 6 things on the menu, and we're going to do all 6 of them really well. You go to coffee shops where they have everything, that you could think of. And he said, like, we'll do some of that. We'll do some special things, but really we're going to be really good at these things. And that's where we're going to put our limit. Yeah. And I love business owners that do that. They understand the boundaries of what they're good at, and they don't want to be everything to everybody, because that's something that I learned early on that you can't do, or else you'll flounder.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's where I was going with what I was saying earlier. It tied into, you said you're learning everything, right? So if you find something you're passionate about that you're good at, and you figure out how to monetize that, you can figure the rest out.
Yep.
If you have a really great skill that people need, boom, you're set. There's your business, right?
Yep.
Right. You have the service or the product, and you're good at it, and people will pay for it. That's all it takes. You can figure out how to do the accounting, and you can figure out how to set up the LLC.
Or pay somebody to do the accounting.
Right.
Yeah.
Or pay somebody to do it. And take that risk, take it out of your paycheck,
yep.
and get another client to pay for it. Right.
Yep.
And that's where, I think too many people make it too confusing to get started.
Yep.
You can have a full-time job and start something in the weeknights and the weekends.
Yep.
If that's where you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the freedom of it, I talked to a lot of people when I was just getting started, and they say, when you become unemployed, you're never going to want to do anything else.
Yep.
Yeah, you're never going to want to do it any other way.
Yeah.
And I mean, I felt that in DC. I was just like, oh gosh, look at all this cool work I could be doing for clients out here.
Yeah. Yeah.
That, so many ideas I could pitch.
Yep.
And not be restrained to one office or one, one entity. And that was a huge part of it too, was I have all these ideas that nobody else is doing. So I should probably be pursuing those ideas.
Yep.
And I think finding that monetizable passion though is huge, because when you figure that out, you're kind of set. And I told that I had a lot of friends in college that struggled with what they wanted to do. And I did too. I didn't know if I wanted a normal job or to work for myself. And then things
a normal job.
That's
fine. Yeah.
And then that's what I say, you know, because people are like, oh, you still doing that video stuff? I'm like, yep, that's my job.
Yep.
So, but I always said, don't figure out the job you think you'll want. Figure out the other parts. Figure out, do you want to sit at a desk?
Yep.
Do you want a bunch of people there? Do you want to be on the road? Do you, what does the job look like? Because you could be doing accounting in 5 different places, and one of them has exactly what you want. One of them you're going out and surveying and going to people's offices and interacting. In another one, you could be stuck in a cubicle all day.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that if you like that too. But I think it's way more important to figure out the attributes of your ideal job than it is to figure out the work you're doing.
Yep.
Because if you get good at a skill, you can do it anywhere.
Yep.
And if you find an office or a company you enjoy, then more likely than not, they'll let you bounce around and they'll let you try out other things and they'll let you fail. Yep. The freedom to fail is so freeing.
It is. It is.
Because, I mean, I pride myself on that in some ways, of being able to bounce back and be like, okay, well, we're not going to do that next time. We're not going to do it that way next time.
Yeah.
Just had one of those last week. Tried to set up a client's new website and their mail servers went down and everything. And I was like, oh, wow, that's never happened before, but we're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. Yeah. And that's part of the journey.
Well, everybody fails.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's just a part of it. And again, it's like the whole thing is about people knowing what they're doing. If some business owner is telling you that they've never failed, they're lying. Yeah. Right. And that's what I found, like, in talking to people, you mentioned it a little bit, but building the attributes that you want in a career is so huge. And I was just talking at this table with someone a few weeks ago who's starting his own business. And he said, well, like, how did you know that, like, this is what you wanted to do? And I said, like, I didn't, right? I knew that I wanted to call my own shots. Yeah. And I knew that I wanted to be a problem solver. I didn't know if that was going to be through communications or some other consulting, or if I would fall into a career that I really liked. And so I said, like, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but I'm going to try my hardest to figure it out. And so in that process over the last, that was 2017. So the last 7 to 8 years, I realized things along the way that are important to me. My house is 3 blocks that way. On any day that I can, I want to live within a 5-block walking commute of where my life is. My son's school is across the street. City Hall is right over there. My office is right here. And then my house is right there. The farthest that I go is to the grocery store across the river. Like, that's my ideal life. But I didn't know that when I started my business. The same thing stands for, like, the type of work that I do. I could do communications for anybody, but what are the ones that, one, pay the bills, but two, like, what are the ones that I'm passionate about? And what I found in that process was really, it was the relationships that I liked developing the most. So for my longest standing clients, I've stayed with them through management shifts, through owner shifts, through different seasons. COVID was a huge season in the middle of all of that. And what I found was, like, when you authentically build those relationships, you're able to be in the thick and the thin with clients where some other vendors just come and go.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's so huge. And a lot of that is figuring out which clients are you passionate about too. And that's been something we're figuring out, switching from political to corporate, is we sort of know the political clients we love to work with. We know what that looks like, what the services are we provide. They know what we provide. And now it's been figuring out, well, what kind of corporate clients, what kind of nonprofit clients do we enjoy?
Yep.
And the purpose-based ones, the ones that are doing great things. We're working with a family caregiving company that every time I sit down to do work for them, I feel inspired and like we're doing the right thing. And I love that feeling, right? And you're not going to get that every time. You're not going to get the perfect gleaming client every time. But that one has already, they've added 3 people to their team that are on our call since we started with them. They're beefing up their marketing and sales game, and we've gotten to be a part of that. And even that part alone, right? That's rewarding to be a part of that and to watch them grow and watch them succeed and further themselves. And all they're trying to do with these new people is to better their client experience. And those are the kind of people I want to work with, right? Whether it's your constituent or your client or better your product, the people that have sort of that startup mentality through and through, which campaigns naturally have.
They have to.
Yeah. I mean, because every day is different. Every month is different. That's my ideal. Hey, let's get after it. Let's do hard work for them. And I would rather do 3 times the work for the same amount of money for clients I love, compared to maybe projects I get bored of or I'm not as passionate about. And that's so true. And clients, just people that you love to work with and talk to. And, when they call, you're not like, which I'm lucky we don't really have any of those right now. But, in the past, there have been ones that's like, this is not a value align with what we want to do. And that's so huge.
And I think that's one thing that that's been a bedrock to what I do is I refuse to take clients on just to pay for overhead, right? There are plenty of businesses out there that take clients on because they need to. I would rather have a firm operation so that you take the clients on that you want to work with. And so like one of my longest standing clients is Meridian Hills Country Club, downtown Indianapolis. And when I brought on our newest team member, I said, like, look, we're problem solvers. Again, we use communications to solve problems. But sometimes that means like setting up chairs when we go to a client, right? Like that is not in our letter of intent, right? For what we're going to do. But we're a part of the team. We want to be an extension of the team. And so it was actually really cool. It came full circle this week for them. Way back in, I don't know, it's November of 2024, the Indiana Chamber of Commerce came out with their best places to work call to action. And I've seen, as from an outside perspective, the work that Meridian Hills has done over the last year to really shore up the way that it looks and feels in the club behind the scenes for its employees. That has nothing to do with communications, right? But I went to the GM and I said, like, I think this is something that you guys should apply for. Willing to help out however I can, but really this is going to be something internal that you guys do. And they were named to the list this week. They were the only country club, one of 4 out of the 150 in the hospitality industry in the state. But now as a communicator, I get to figure out how to help them leverage it, right? And help them tell their story. So I think that's another place where, some folks that are in our industry would just view it as just through the blinders of what they are required to do. But what I found, the best success that I have is when I truly try to be a part of their team in an authentic way. It helps me in the long run too. Yeah.
More ideas is never bad. Right. And that's what, in the video editing world, you wind up getting a lot of revisions down the road. And that's something that happens. And I've worked with people before that would pull their hair out if they got revisions. And I'm like, it's not our video. It's theirs. It's the client's. The client's going to own this and present this. And if they want that, they want that. And more often than not, the more ideas you get in there and the more thought you get to it, it winds up being a better product. And even if it's not better creatively to you, because a lot of it's subjective, it's what they had in their head. And we brought it to life. And you have to look at it that way. And that's true to all clients is, you're there to help them out. And if you can chime in on non-comms related things, go for it, because the more ideas you get in that room, the better. And if it winds up being a good idea, they're more grateful to have you there. If it winds up being a bad idea, it's a footnote in the hour-long Google Meet. So that's, I think, being a part of the team and finding clients where you feel free enough to put your ideas out there
Yep.
is a huge part of the process.
Yeah, no, it is. What, again, when I was coming in, I was thinking through over the last 7 years and some of the highlights and the lowlights. What's your favorite moment so far?
Oh, favorite moment.
It can be big or little.
Yeah.
I'll go first. What you think?
Okay.
Because since I thought of the question, I already know the answer to mine. One of mine, and this is super easy, was getting the first check. When I was going out on a limb to start the business, I went to my wife and I said, "Hey, I think this is what I want to do. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'll figure it out along the way." And frankly, I've seen a lot stupider people that have figured out how to run a business. Like I think I can figure it out. But for the next 6 months, like we just need to eat rice and beans. And thankfully we did it before we had kids, which made it a whole lot easier. But once somebody who wasn't related to me paid me for something that I did for them, I was like, man, I can do this. Right. Yeah. And so that is kind of a shot in the arm that you need. That will forever be a memorable moment for me as a business owner. But, also and this is tangential to, owning a business, but my wife and I went through infertility for a long time. And we went down the adoption route. We were matched with our son in Korea. And in the middle of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I take my business with me to Korea? And so it was terrifying because, again, I had no blueprint to figure it out. But I had built all these authentic relationships with my clients that they were willing to work with me while I was halfway across the world adopting our son. And so I still remember the moment sitting in our Airbnb in the middle of Seoul, Korea, in October of 2020. And thinking how cool it is that I have the ability as a business owner to literally go halfway across the world, to still do what I do in Noblesville, Indiana, to solve problems for my clients, but to be able to do it on my own terms and to expand our family and adopt our son in the process. It was like a pinch me moment, right? Where I cannot even imagine having to go to HR to figure out if I had enough leave time to take FMLA to figure out how to go build my family. Yeah. And that's the biggest thing that I found in this process is I started a business to make lots of money. I wanted to be Steve Jobs and float around in my, Scrooge McDuck, pool of coins. But in the process, I fell in love with the freedom to call my own shots, to work with the people that I wanted to on my timeline, and to be able to, if I decided with my wife to go to Korea for 2 months and adopt our son. And I think that freedom is something going into it, I never knew that I wanted, but now it's like a non-negotiable. I have to have it for the rest of my life.
Absolutely. I think, anybody that says they're not motivated monetarily at some level is lying.
Yep.
So I remember in high school picking up a check for $3,000 and my mind just about melted.
Yep.
We were driving there. We were so excited. We got it. We're like, this is huge.
Yes.
This is unbelievable.
Yes.
And then, that business came and went. And then this past year, graduating from school, getting married, going on a trip, having some student debt to pay off, all these things, hitting not just our goal, but our stretch goal last year. That was huge because that was to all of the family members that said one of us should get a normal job.
Yep.
No more.
Yep.
Yeah. You don't have to buy that anymore. And, Emily's student debt's paid off. We're all settled there. So that was huge.
Yep.
Just proving to ourselves that we could do it. But then, on the other side of things, being able to help out and fill in the gaps at the wedding, right?
Yep.
Have freedom there for, if moms and dads can't cover everything, well, hey, we're happy to have skin in the game. Mm-hmm. Being able to surprise people with nice gifts, or, my stepdad does all my taxes for free. Right. So to be able to, every year after tax day, we take them out for a super nice dinner.
Yep.
That's one of our things because he doesn't charge us. So we try to give them a great night and not worry about it. That's a great experience. But then also just the clients we've gotten to meet. There have been so many pinch me moments. Getting tickets to inauguration was a pinch me moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we didn't get to go in because of how things panned out. But we were like, did that just
You're not that important.
Yeah, right. Yeah. We're like, did a congressman just come up to us at an event and give us tickets to inauguration? Did that happen?
Yeah.
And that's, we're subject to enjoying the perks, right, of the job. And those sorts of things. Anytime we're somewhere where we feel like we shouldn't be, it's a really cool experience. Whether it's filming 3 presidential candidates, not necessarily for their campaign, but when they visit Indy, or going to Missouri for a high profile race, those sorts of things are huge. And then realizing that, hey, I've been around now Governor Braun for 3 years on campaign trails and been by him, and he recognizes me. And when you start to put those dots together, I think that's so fun because, there are people you admire, there are people that are doing cool things, there are people that are having meetings in the Oval Office, and they also know that we're Jack and Emily. And that, the relationship by association is a cool part of the job. And it's also really cool to get those pull aside moments where you just get to know them as humans, candidates and clients and business owners, and say, what made you want to do this? Or how were you successful in business? And hopefully we can talk to some of those people along the way. But that's been huge, is learning from those people and people that I admire, and maybe I don't have them as mentors, but I have them as people I look up to. And we also get to do work for them.
Speaking of that, how'd you celebrate your 21st birthday?
How did I? Oh, yeah, this is a good one. We have a client. It was the day after the primary. So we went up to Fort Wayne for a campaign party the night before. And then everybody was trying to get me to stay till midnight to have a drink with them. But we had to work the next day. So we drove back to Indy, woke up at like 6 a.m., went and filmed TV ads for a guy who's going to run for Congress. And then he found out it was my 21st. So him and his wife took us out for a drink after we were done with the shoot. So that
Only Jack Hudson.
That was my 21st fun. And then I went out with friends that night. But that was.
I think that shows like what you were talking about earlier with the work-life balance, right? It really is more of an integration.
Absolutely.
Than anything. And when you work with people that you authentically enjoy being around, right? It is still work. Absolutely. But you are able to integrate yourself into it, and they know you for Jack, the guy that does our video, not just some random video guy.
Right. Well, and that's been a cool shift, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but getting people to remove Emily and I from the equation and say, we're hiring Babel Media. Because eventually we don't want it to just be us. And we don't necessarily want to be the people on the shoot every time. And that's been a cool experience to be around Indy and say, oh, we own Babel. And they're like, oh, I've heard of you guys. You do so-and-so's work, right? That's a whole nother journey of, especially for small businesses, is removing yourself from it, because you always start with start with your friends and family pool, and they know you for you. And what I've found is, part of it is just talking about yourself like you're a little bit bigger than you are, and introducing yourself as a brand. And what I've said before is, I work for Babel Media, and then they're like, oh, what do you do? And I'm the owner, right? And then they think of Babel Media before they think of me. And that's been a challenge. And honestly, in the current digital landscape, it almost needs to be tied more to you individually. That's part of podcasting, right? Is getting personal brand built in addition to your business.
And that's honestly is something that's really hard for me. When I worked for Coates, this wasn't like a hard established rule, but kind of the mantra of the office was, it's not our name on the door. Right. So you're going to write letters that you may not agree with, but it's because Dan Coates' name on the door, and that's who you work for. You're not supposed to be in any pictures. You're not supposed to be in a press release. You're not supposed to be in an article. Right. And so really like I got really good at making Dan the Coats look good. And so then when I stepped out and ran my own business and ran for council and, did these things where it was my name on the door, it is such a role reversal. And the balance of doing that in an authentic way is hard sometimes, because we all know people that do it completely inauthentically and they just flounder at it.
Right.
And so figuring out how to do that, make yourself as, a little bit bigger than what you are, it's hard.
Yeah. And as a business owner, it's crucial that while you are doing the best work for your clients, you also have to progress individually.
Yep.
If you do want to grow and you want to be a part of the community and you want to be known. And I think you're doing a detriment to yourself if you don't do those things.
How have you done that?
How have I done that?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, a lot of it's networking, right? A lot of it is applying for things, getting involved in organizations, helping out, whether it's in your hometown or in Indy or, there's some great programs in Pendleton that really good people are trying to put together. And I've said, hey, can we help get you guys some press?
Like what?
So Build Your Future. I've talked to you about it, but my cousins who are in construction put this on at the middle school, and it's one day for all of 7th grade. They get introduced to the trades. The trades are struggling to get talent, to say the least. I think it's beyond that. It's a huge issue, and those jobs are going to start getting paid more and more and more. And they need them desperately. So they introduce all the kids to the trades. There's 6 or 7 rotations throughout the day, like it's a class day. So last year they built 10 picnic tables that are now the picnic tables outside. This year they're going to stain those and build a few more. During the lunch portion, if you're not in lunch, they're doing Touch a Truck, and a bunch of local contractors, business owners, Fredericks Construction, IMI, all those people are bringing trucks, concrete movers, all those things out, and people can get up and sit in them, see in the back, do the whole thing. They'll tip the dump trucks up. So it's to introduce them to that. But then there's also, at least last time, there was a seminar portion where the students, it was more of a traditional lesson of here's how much the average college job pays. Here's how much the trades can pay. And here's what that looks like after 5 years and with the average amount of student debt. And that might be a lesson that needs to be geared a little more towards high schoolers, right? But I think you saw people click and you saw people get excited about the trades. And then the 8th grade goes out and does a community cleanup day. So that last year they went downtown and did a bunch of projects in the parks and stuff. But they want to make this a scalable program that any school can do, and hopefully every school does in Indiana, to reduce the stigma on trade, introduce people to multiple careers. And I was like, this is huge. And you should never have a funding issue for a program like this. It costs about $10,000 to do. You should get a large corporate sponsor to just cut the check and help build the program out. And then if you get extra money, great, roll that into school number 2, 3, 4, 5. But I've been like, here's the pitch, right? Go to an Indiana Business Journal and say, hey, there's a huge trades problem. We want to write an article about workforce and how we're trying to curb that. And it's starting in rural communities where there is less trade stigma than the donut counties or Marion County. And I think that pitch is an easy one, right? And it's a great story. It's a great program. And we're trying to help in that way. There's a high school entrepreneurship program that is starting in Pendleton that we're going to be mentors at. And they're spreading all across the state. I think they have like 12 campuses doing it, including Fishers High School, Pendleton Heights. And then I think Kokomo has a similar program. So those things, right? We try to give back there however we can, and helping them is good for us, right? It's good for business. You're there with a bunch of contractors and construction crews and help land a big corporate deal. We're going to do video coverage for the day. We did it last year. And giving back in those ways, yes, it's good for you, but more importantly, it makes you feel good and you're helping your community out. And then growing your name individually, right? That's applying for awards. That's investing in yourself. That's doing continuing education of some sort. And then that's having those mentorships, right? And I found that once you get to a certain point, they'll say, okay, it's time for you to meet with so-and-so, right? And so-and-so could be lunch with the president of Butler. So-and-so could be lunch with the head of AT&T or this or that or the other. All of those things is once you meet people and you get enough names on your client list and you have good enough work, then more doors open. And that is a revolving thing.
But I think there's something key there. It's like choosing to level up.
Yes.
Right. Because whereas like if you go through the corporate world, they have tracks that you kind of just naturally do that.
Right.
Where like when you're calling your own shots, you have to figure out what that is and how you're going to do it, and have the drive to make it happen.
Yeah.
And so, I've seen that in my own, journey as a business owner, being on boards. For me, it's here locally in Noblesville because that helps on the city council side as well. But being involved at that level is really important. Now I just joined the board of Roncalli High School where I went to school. And even though I don't live on the south side, right, there are connections that I have from, the city council and understanding finance on the municipal level that I can apply at the high school level, right? And so while they may seem disconnected, they really aren't. And the world's so small that finding ways to give back and to be involved outside of what you do professionally and your family. I think it's almost mandatory that you have to do it because it makes you a better leader. It makes you more well-rounded and it gives you insight. There are so many times that I have learned something from somebody else that I'm on a board with that I never would have thought of just sitting in my office on my own.
Right.
And so purposefully choosing to be around other bright people that aren't, similar to you, it has been so helpful to me as a business owner. Yeah.
And I think you learn about just general challenges that exist in the world that you didn't know.
Yep.
And that's something we love about campaigns is going to meet with X ethnic community that's a round table and it's a nonpartisan event and you hear about, hey, we're struggling with this. And I'm like, I didn't even know that existed.
Yep.
I didn't know that was a problem, right?
Yep.
It's all just broadening your scope of understanding and knowledge, and all of those lessons apply elsewhere in life. And you start to realize when you go into a room or you have a meeting, hey, I probably don't know what these people are going to talk to me about. It makes you less of a know-it-all. The more you talk to people and the more you know, the less you realize you know. And I think it's that there's a curve of when you learn things. And when you first get into something, you think you know everything. Like when you figure out camera settings, you think you know everything. And then you get to a point and you realize there will always be people that know abundantly more than me about technical things.
Yep.
And that curve is interesting to watch, and it applies sort of every avenue you go down independently. And being able to learn every day and get involved in your community will help with that.
Yep.
Well, next week, let's talk about how you can get involved in your community.
That's great.
Awesome.
Can't wait.